Don't even come up in my comment section pretending like you are better than 99.999% of all adults on the planet, because I call your bluff. We have all been there at some point in our lives. It's 4:52 p.m. You're watching the clock, typing away at your computer. It's as if the second hand is moving at a snail's pace. It's been a long, stressful day. All of a sudden, you catch a whiff of some funk coming from your underarms. Yes, we have all been there before. At some point in our adult lives, our armpits, they have a funk to them. They have an odor. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you practical tips, tricks, strategies, approaches, knowledge to empower you not to have a funk. How to remove odor from the underarms. Underarm odor is inevitable at some point in our lives because there are a lot of sweat glands under the arms. It's an area where you have friction, so the sweat gets trapped there more readily. It doesn't air out. It can stay moist. The bacteria that make up the skin under your arms, they snack on that sweat and release odorific compounds. Having underarm malodor is not necessarily solely related to what you're doing in your hygiene routine. It might just be something going on with you internally, namely something you are ingesting. If you're someone who likes to overindulge from time to time in broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, onions, garlic, you wild person you. Yeah, those vegetables contain a lot of sulfur compounds that can get broken down and leave you smelling a little bit funky. Also, maybe you're taking a dietary supplement that has choline or taurine. Depending on the dose, this can leave you smelling a little fishy. Maybe you're taking a medication. Medications can alter your sweat and how you smell. Also, your hormones. They too can have influences on how much sweat you're producing and ultimately tip the balance in favor of smelling a little off. Now, one mistake a lot of people make when they're trying to get rid of odor under the arms is they reach for a deodorant that is heavily scented. Basically, what they are reaching for is fragrance. There isn't really anything active in there that's going to cut down on sweat, that's going to alter the bacterial composition of the skin under the arms. It's really just a stick to disperse perfume on the surface of the skin. Fine product to use if you don't have body odor. If you want to smell nice, great way to perfume the skin, I suppose. However, if you have odor, you're struggling with underarm odor, this is not only not going to help, likely going to make you smell worse, because the perfume plus the funk, it's a weird mix. So rather than reaching for those things, what you need to do are some of the following approaches. And first is, sounds really basic, but try and take measures to reduce accumulation of sweat under the arms. Make sure that you're wearing sleeves that are loose and allow for air to circulate so that the sweat evaporates a lot more quickly, doesn't have time to break down and make you smell funky. This is a lot more difficult in the winter months because it's freezing out. We wear a lot of layers and we go inside, the heater's cranked up, and the sweat under our arms accumulates in our sweaters and things of that sort that aren't really circulating the air as well. So maybe try and layer and remove clothing that is not as great at allowing air to circulate over your skin, and stick to moisture wicking fabrics. Rather than reaching for those scented deodorants, consider, if you aren't already, using an antiperspirant. Antiperspirants actually address one of the root causes of underarm odor by reducing sweat. They do so because they contain aluminum salt that localize in the sweat gland, plug it up so that you produce less sweat. Make sure you apply an antiperspirant at night rather than when you get up in the morning. Applying it at night allows for better localization of the aluminum salt into the sweat gland. When you wake up the following morning, you are free to shower, to rinse the skin, because at that point the aluminum salts are down in the sweat gland. Anything on the surface of the skin isn't going to do you any favors. If anything, is going to increase the likelihood that you have underarm irritation, which is a problem for a lot of people who use aluminum containing antiperspirants. Nowadays, it's very challenging to find a fragrance-free antiperspirant. So this fragrance in your antiperspirant, again, might be mixing with some of your sweat and making you smell a little funky because of that fragrance. There are several fragrance-free antiperspirants that I often recommend. The first is by Vanity Cream. It was discontinued for a while, but it is now back. This is one of my favorites because it's a nice nice, gentle formula. It's not drying, and it's generally well tolerated. The second one is by the brand Certain Dry, and this will knock out the sweat. It's very strong, if you will. A lot of people express to me that when they use it, they get burning, they get stinging, and it's actually kind of irritating for some people. So keep that in mind. When it comes to using an antiperspirant, here's another thing that no one teaches you. You don't actually, if you're using them correctly, you don't necessarily need to be using an antiperspirant every single night or every single day, because once you've been using it consistently for a couple of nights in a row, the aluminum salts have gotten down in the sweat gland and you have a reduction in sweat. You don't need to keep reapplying it. Maybe apply it just once a week. Not only will that help cut down on the amount of money you spend on antiperspirants, it'll also reduce the likelihood that you develop a lot of irritation. So that Certain Dry product in particular, I just use once a week, and it really helps cut down on sweat. The other thing that I have recommended in numerous videos, and you probably are already aware of it if you've watched any of my videos on body odor, including foot odor, is to consider using a benzoyl peroxide acne wash as an underarm wash 1-2 times a week. This will help reduce the burden of bacteria that live under your arm that ultimately break down sweat and contribute to odor. Now, a lot of people say that this is drying and irritating. Makes sense because benzoyl peroxide can be drying and irritating. So A, make sure you're only using it a couple times a week. B, make sure you're not using a big glob and getting too much product under there. C, make sure you rinse it off thoroughly. Depending on how you're shaped, sometimes cleansers and things like that, they don't rinse off so well. The underarm there's this prominent hollow which can trap cleanser residue. If you have a shower attachment that you can do by hand, get it up in there and make sure you rinse it all off. That's a big tip, because I think a lot of people get irritation from benzoyl peroxide just because maybe they don't rinse it off all the way. That's another thing to just keep in mind. I'm not saying everyone who has problems with it is doing that, but it is an area where you can get trapping of cleanser residue pretty easily. Now, aside from benzoyl peroxide, there are a few other reagents that you may have heard about that also can be helpful in this way. The first is Hibiclens or chlorhexidine. It is a topical antiseptic. That's okay to use maybe once a week, but I don't recommend using that as part of your everyday routine because it is pretty broad spectrum and you don't want to completely wipe out all of the microflora, but it definitely can be a game changer for people who have significant odor related to the bacteria under their arms. Just kind of restart things. The other one is betadine surgical scrub. Earlier this week, I actually did a video all about betadine surgical scrub. And let me tell you, it will wipe out the bacteria that break down the sweat. So it can get you over a hurdle of body odor, but it's pretty drying and irritating if you use it regularly. And again, it's pretty intense as far as wiping stuff out, so not ideal in the long run to use all the time. The fourth option is one I really like on the go, and that is to get yourself a hypochlorous acid spray. A lot of people like to use these for their face. They're super gentle, and it helps to, again, cut down on the bacteria that break down sweat and contribute to odor. It's not as aggressive in terms of the wiping out of microflora. It's gentle. It's very gentle for sensitive skin. It can be a touch drying, but not anywhere near as drying in comparison to benzoyl peroxide, and it can be left on the skin. You can spray it there. You don't have to rinse it off. So that makes it a great option when you're on the go to cut down on the bacterial breakdown of sweat. It's something I use a lot when I'm working out. So that approach is effectively deodorizing by addressing the bacteria under your arms. What about Lumi deodorant? You see ads for this all the time on social media. Check out my video reviewing it. I go into details with regards to Lumi in that video. So we talked about reducing sweat with an antiperspirant. We talked about reducing bacteria with one of these, although I favor benzoyl peroxide and or hypochlorous acid. I think those are safer options to use on the regular. The other thing that a lot of people don't think about is hair removal. Hair removal under the arms can really change the game for your body odor. And the reason is a couple of possibilities. First is that hair just increases the surface area for sweat to hang out. And in doing so, there's more for the bacteria to break down to contribute to odor. The other is it might limit access of active ingredients like benzoyl peroxide or your antiperspirant antiperspirant into the underarm skin. So you might either not be getting the best hygiene to the skin directly, or maybe things like antiperspirants aren't actually having an opportunity to get down into the sweat gland to even help you out at all. Removing the hair has been shown to help quite a bit actually in body hair removal. Now you could shave, you could wax, you could get laser hair removal, and I've got videos talking about the pluses and minuses of different hair removal approaches. Or you could just cut. You don't have to shave it flush, you could just trim the hair, and that can help. There's actually a bacterial infection that can happen on the skin under the arms. Also, it can happen in the groin area as well. More common in areas where you have a lot of humidity, like we see a lot of it here in Houston actually. It's a bacterial infection due to Corynebacterium. It's called Trichomycosis axillaris. This bacteria gets up in the underarm area and it latches on to the hair, and it makes these little almost like nodules on the hair strands. And let me tell you, this bacterial infection can leave you smelling really funky because the bacteria actually breaks down testosterone in the sweat and releases this strong odor. And the treatment for this is trimming the hair to get rid of those nodules, those concretions, those little tubes, cylinders on the hair strands, and topical antimicrobials. Benzoyl peroxide might help this out if you're dealing with it, or you know, you may be prescribed a topical antibiotic if you're dealing with this. But regardless of having this condition or not, trimming the hair or removing the hair actually can help quite a bit. The last thing I want to emphasize is that underarm skin is pretty delicate territory. It's very vulnerable to irritation. The skin is delicate, you have sweat, you have moisture trapping, you have friction. All of these things can end up causing quite a bit of irritation. Now, a popular trend on social media is to pursue different acids under the arm to modify the pH of the skin barrier there and help support, if you will, a favorable microbiome that is less odor producing, we'll say. That makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense that people appreciate benefit in doing so. However, I really caution against doing this because exfoliating acids like glycolic acid, lactic acid, salicylic acid, if you're buying a product that is marketed for the face, for the arms, and you use it under the arms, it can cause a lot of irritation. It's not formulated for that area. That irritation can end up making your odor issues worse because it compromises barrier integrity, making it more favorable for bacteria to thrive and jive. Plus, if you deal with discoloration under the arms, this can make discoloration quite a bit worse just by creating a lot of irritation and inflammation. So I caution the use of glycolic acid, a popular underarm trend on social media. I caution using glycolic acid, like the Ordinary's glycolic acid toner, for example. I have a whole video explaining more in detail if you want to check it out about using glycolic acid under the arms. I also have videos on underarm lightening, so check those out. But with that, those are the tips and tricks for how to get rid of odor under the arms. I hope this video was helpful to you guys. On the end slate, I'm going to put one of my recent videos on hygiene mistakes to avoid. So if you're dealing with body odor, I think, you know, it's worth watching that because they're common mistakes that might actually be contributing to your odor concerns. But if you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.